Not really much of a big Ghostbusters guy. I've watched the original first movie and I've watched the original second movie. I did not enjoy the one that came out in 2016. Ghostbusters Afterlife was actually a really good film, but I have not seen Frozen Empire yet, and it doesn't look like it's getting a lot of good reviews. And so far in the box office, it's kind of struggling, just like how Ghostbusters Afterlife struggled a little bit. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reading the worst reviews for the movie Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. But before we fully dive into reading these bad reviews, let's look at some numbers real quick. Ghostbusters Afterlife. 64% of the critics recommend that you go watch this film, and 94% of the audience recommend that you go watch this film. Wow, pretty big for the audience. So it looks like it was actually a pretty decent film. But here, let's look at the second installment of this, which was Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. 43% of the critics recommend that you go watch this film, and 84% of the audience recommend that you go watch this film. Both movies had really high audience scores. And both movies for the critics, well, they were never that high to begin with. It's fair to say if we're comparing audience and critic scores from both Frozen Empire and Afterlife, it looks like Afterlife was just a better movie than Frozen Empire. But how did they do in the box office? Ghostbusters Afterlife only made $204 million. That's pretty low. What actually kind of shocks me a little bit is that Ghostbusters 2 that came out in the 80s and the Ghostbusters that came out in 2016 actually made more money than this one, which I kind of liked a lot better than the other two films. If we're a little bit curious here to see how much money Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is making, around the time of this recording, it looks like it's at $61.6 million so far in the box office. But enough of that. It's time to get down to the nitty-gritty, the stickies and the nasties, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing, reading the worst reviews for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Let's start with the critics. Ghostbusters Part 1 concludes with an epic battle against a giant marshmallow kaiju. Part 2 sees the Statue of Liberty spring to life, and now Frozen Empire wraps up anticlimactically in a garbage. Felt like a Disney Plus adaptation of the classic IP. Ooh, wow. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is a dull, forgettable piece of work that goes to show that some ghosts need to be put to rest. Now, I will say this. I believe that Ghostbusters, at least that film franchise itself, did not need a reboot at all. You made two movies. You tried to do something in 2016. You should have just put it to rest right there. Ghostbusters was fine the way it was. It doesn't need to be touched. It didn't need to bring back Bill Murray and some of the original cast just for, a cash grab. I don't feel like Ghostbusters was a franchise you should have just pulled out of the grave and said, let's try something with it. It was fine the way it was. It works best when it apes the grounded tone and smart assery of the original, but the writing isn't anywhere near as sharp as the 1984 film. See. It was just because the 1984 film, it was an original type of film. You're not going to beat something that just had an original idea. You're going to try and, do your best to be as good as the original or be better than the original. But if you can't live up to that, the movie is, for sure going to be a flop because you're trying to re-catch lightning in a bottle. To me personally, I just feel like the 1984 one, it should have just been one movie and that's it. I don't even think it needed really much of a second movie. But hey, Hollywood is Hollywood. They're gonna try and make a sequel. A chilling reminder of just how creatively corrupt the blockbuster film has become. Movies about ghosts in general, it's really hard to try and be creative, but I guess with the creativity behind Ghostbusters, and when I say Ghostbusters, I mean the original 1984 one, it had such originality behind it is why it worked for that time. And I think if you're trying to remake that type of thing over and over, it's just not going to have that same effect. It's like, we know what to expect. It's not going to be good if you try. A no-gozer. The 1984 original was original and entertaining. This fifth installment is not the former and barely the latter. The Ghostbusters song asks, who you gonna call? My suggestion is call it quits, but I suspect there's a ghost of a chance of that happening. I mean, look, he hit the nail on the head, man. It's like he said, we're on our fifth installment of this Ghostbusters franchise, and look, it took you 5 films to make it $1 billion franchise. 5 films. There's like a massive gap in between all these films, you know, from the 2 that came out into the 80s, the one that came out in 2016, and then we had one come out in 2021, and then another one that followed up right behind that. Look, I think it is not a failed franchise. I think the more movies that come out of this that end up not being as good is what's going to make it a failed franchise. We're gonna read one more critic review. I need a good one. There are just too many characters, old and new. Even the poster is overloaded. It feels long with action and special effects that are not so special. I mean, yeah, the cast is deep. The cast is deep. I mean, all these actors are really good actors. It's not like this film had bad actors in it, but it's when you have so much of these actors, you could either have something really good or you can either have something really bad, and it could just be a whole cluster of like stardom that, you know, sometimes is not always needed. I will say though, the casting for this, I think there is a very good cast. Well, that is enough of what the critics had to say, so let us move on into my favorite part, and that is what the audience has to say, because the audience does not hold back. Simple and to the point, not worth paying for a ticket. I bought a ticket to go see it because I'm curious, you know, if this is the type of content I do, I'd at least need to go see the movie for myself to be like, all right, time to make my judgment. Is it really good or is it really bad or is it One of the worst movies I've ever sat through. See, look, have you seen Madam Web? Not a good movie. Confusing. Weak plot, just lousy. Wasted my money and time. I just don't think it's going to be that bad of a movie. I don't even, maybe I might be the 84% that recommends that you go watch this film. There's a chance, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as a lot of movies I've seen. Fast X, I don't think this movie is going to be as bad as Fast X. I do not, for a shadow of a doubt, think that this movie is going to be worse than Madam Web. All right? The jokes weren't funny and the cast did not seem to bond with each other. Plot was pretty much the same as other Ghostbusters movies, and it was just boring to watch. I could get this opinion kinda, because since it's like the 5th installment, they're gonna try and, you know, do a whole lot of callbacks to some of the original stuff. I mean, they brought some of the original cast in there, like Bill Murray and stuff like that, so there's gonna be hundreds and hundreds of callbacks, so I could see your point of why you think it's pretty boring, because it's everything that you expected. You expected this to happen. Gonna have the original cast. I mean, expect that to happen for sure. Boring, stupid theme, sophomoric humor. Terrible movie. My daughter was terrified and started crying, begging to leave. We walked out halfway through. Okay, that is wild. Your daughter was crying and she was like, please, let's leave. I think she was just scared of the ghost. I don't think because it was a terrible movie she was crying. I just think she got scared. This movie was beyond awful. Rotten Tomatoes wouldn't let me rate it as 0. It is 2 hours of my life that I will never get back. Let's read one more and we will wrap this video up. And something to wrap it up real straight and to the point, we have the final bad review. Total boring crap fest. Well, that pretty much wraps it up right there. Have you seen Frozen Empire? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Do you feel in between? Is it just an okay movie? Let me know your comments down below. Why do you think this is a possible flop? Or basically why this is most likely just a flop. Leave a like on this video because it helps out so much. And if you're new to the channel, you want to see more content like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It helps out so much.